When we started out, I don't really know what how the initial relationship was established, but because I came on as a hired hand at the beginning, but I think the idea was to make sure that whatever we did in a military setting with a military venue, that we had as much credibility as possible. We approached them essentially to initiate a relationship. They jumped at the opportunity. We ate it up, and I think what it's done in the long run is done exactly what it set out to do. Is we could consult with them to make sure that we were doing things right, and ultimately as respectfully as possible. In my conversations with our liaison, and subsequently experienced firsthand a fair amount of respect from the Air Force itself in how we were portraying it. We took what they advised and assimilated it into our product, and we've got nothing but compliments from the Air Force itself, from every cadet right on up to every four-star, how it looked, how it represented the Air Force, and ultimately how it lightened certain perceptions, certainly in my portrayal of a colonel and now general.
It was a matter of choices and asking MGM to trust me and my instincts about which way to go with the character, because there's no way I could do what Kurt Russell did. If you all remember the movie, life's too short to be that stoic and serious throughout the course of a series. Not only that, I cannot make my hair do what his does.
Because I had a certain idea that was fairly loosely structured, but it was important that I get some validation for how I was going to portray a military officer. So I got a nice little pat on the back from a couple of the four-star generals, chiefs of staff, General Ryan and General Jumper.
Come in. General, I'd like to talk to you about this mission upon which we're about to embark. Seems a bit ridiculous, doesn't it?
Have you met General Ryan?
Hello, Colonel.
The General Ryan, Chief of Staff?
That's right.
Shouldn't there have been a memo or something?
The scene we had together was essentially me coming in and kind of complaining about some aspect of some operation. But the real deal was in the office. During the scene, of course, I make a fool of myself as O'Neill. Between the takes of the scene, I just had to ask the real guy if my portrayal of Colonel O'Neill was remotely credible.
I cornered Ryan, and asked him if he had colonels that actually behaved and the way I did, and how was my portrayal going, and was he, you know, was it a little shaky, or was I being disrespectful? And he stopped me in mid-sentence and just said, "Son," which I thought was rather condescending. He said, "Yes, we've got colonels like you, and worse."
In fact, both generals that I met, that I worked with on Stargate, said the same thing. Said, "You're doing what we all want to do, but really can't."
Got your hands full with that one, eh, George?
I was invited by the Air Force to come to Washington D.C. and receive an award for my representation and my portrayal, and ultimately the show's contributions. And they said enlistment was up because of the show, and I found that a little hard to believe. The gala that evening, the award ceremony, was the culmination of the week's activities. Black tie event, the only black tie event that the Air Force has all year long, in this grand ballroom of the hotel. And it was to present and recognize the real heroes. I mean, guys that have, you know, been through wars or made contributions technologically. Thank God they had things in perspective enough to present my award before dinner, because after dinner the real guys got their awards. in the middle of the dinner, there was a fire alarm. Now, mind you, this is a black tie event, so we all exited in the hot, muggy night in Washington, and that alone was quite a sight to see. All the ribbons and bows, photo ops, plenty. That was great. That part was really fun.
What you don't see and what doesn't come through on the television is the humanity of these actors and actresses that appear on the and what we have here in the form of Richard Dean Anderson, MacGyver, Colonel Jack O'Neill, is a truly fantastic American who cares deeply about our country, our people in uniform, and our United States Air Force.
I got an eagle and then a medallion from General Jumper that showing their appreciation for my contributions and the show's contributions. And then as an added bonus, General Jumper presented me with General Stars. I became an honorary Brigadier General.
If you're watching closely, Richard has been actually the beneficiary of a recent promotion, which I think is quite appropriate for a guy who saves the planet every week. Absolutely. So what we have for you is a set of stars, Richard. You are an honorary Brigadier General of the United States Air Force.
I knew I had been humbled in my tracks. I knew I had been paid a great compliment, and I was never so honored in my life. My father, who passed away about a year and a half ago, I know, God bless him, how proud he would have been of me that evening. Made it all really worth it. I got a tour of the Pentagon, and I'd never been there before. I'd been to Washington several times, but I'd never really examined any part of Washington D.C. other than the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. But I went to the Pentagon and was given, I guess, a fairly typical tour. Got in a little golf cart because there's 17 miles of hallways there. There was a seaman that drove us around, and he was just a chatterbox of information. Shaved, clean, bald, shiny head, and just all proper. Tried to loosen him up a little bit by asking some of the questions that you don't normally ask. Things like, why do you have to wear that collar, and are you happy with your uniform? You know, why is that owl on top of the kiosk? But I was just duly impressed by the venue itself, just the bustle of activity. And then upon reflection and through our tour guide, really getting a perspective on what transpires behind those doors. Hallowed as they may be, it's serious stuff. I visited all the memorials that were there and all the rooms of the Medal of Honor winners, and certainly the new chapel they have there where the 9/11 plane came through. And it was an awesomely humbling experience. I was ushered into the office of General Tom Mosley, or Buzz, as he likes to be called. Within a minute, he came out and greeted me, very boisterous, you know, heavy handshake kind of guy, full of energy. He showed me his office. He's got a collection of these commemorative type coins, and just footballs and memorabilia, and just all kinds of pictures all over the place. And I love hearing basically war stories or life stories about the military in particular. And I let him know that, so that was like opening up the gates. The tone in General Mosley's office was such that, you know, very serious about the business at hand and took care of business, but was gracious enough or had things in perspective enough to make sure that he, you know, brought me in and met MacGyver. I had the opportunity to go to Walter Reed Hospital and visit some of the troops that had come back from Iraq, injured troops. And there's nothing more humbling than that experience. My being there it was openly expressed was so appreciated that it makes you a little misty when you, in retrospect, talked about 10 or 12 guys, spent as much time as I possibly could there. Guys with no limbs, paralyzed, unable to speak, hoses coming out of their necks. I mean, just very embattled human beings. They were all just, regardless of the fact that I was a part of a show that represented a part of the armed forces, the fact that a human being from the outside came in to spend some time, and I don't know, it's one of those experiences where it's virtually impossible to relate what kind of an experience it becomes to really be face to face and in the same room and communicating with guys that have seen frontline action. But it was so appreciated by every man and woman that I met. That's what made me feel the best about that whole experience. Notwithstanding the great honor of receiving the awards and the recognition, the visit to Walter Reed was the highlight. Definitely want to go back. I have not been more honored by any experience in my business or in my life. Mrs. Jumper had said, you know, the last person to get this was Jimmy Stewart in 1987. And you want to throw me in with that crowd of one? Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, in answer to the question about the owl on top of the kiosk, when it was first built, they had pigeons crapping all over the top of this building. And apparently the daughter of one of the generals at the time, I believe, was a little 9-year-old kid who just said, well, Daddy, aren't pigeons afraid of owls? They all recognized that that was quite possibly the solution, as it turned out to be. So after spending Lord knows how many tax dollars to fix the problem, a little $16 statuette saved the day.